I always believed in female friendship. Real, unshakable, unbreakable. The kind where you could call in the middle of the night and she would answer. The kind where no topic was off limits, no secret too shameful, no boundary too close. And I had that. Or so I thought. Katya and I weren't just friends. We were sisters in everything but blood. We had grown up together, shared our dreams, our fears, our lives. And when I met Sasha, I thought I'd found another piece of the happiness I'd always wanted. Love and friendship, side by side, unshaken, unwavering. For 2 years, Sasha and I were inseparable. We built a life together, piece by piece, in laughter and late night conversations, in stolen kisses and quiet mornings. I thought we were moving towards something permanent, something unbreakable. But love, as I would soon learn, is only as strong as the people holding on to it. Katya had always been beautiful, effortlessly so. The kind of beauty that turned heads in every room she entered, that made men stumble over their words, and women measure themselves against her without meaning to. But I never saw her as a threat. She was my best friend, my sister, and she would never, except she did. It started as little things, a glance that lingered too long, a laugh that was too rich, too warm, a closeness that felt just a little too intimate. But I pushed away my doubts because doubt meant distrust, and I had no reason not to trust her. It's just Katya, I told myself. She would never do that. Then came the day that shattered everything. Sasha and I had planned to meet at our favorite cafe. Nothing special, just a casual evening together, like so many before. But I decided to surprise him. I arrived early, excited to see his face light up when he saw me, to steal a moment of tenderness before we settled into our usual routine. I stepped inside, the familiar warmth of the place wrapping around me like a well-worn blanket. My eyes scanned the room, searching for him, for us, for the life we had built together. And then I saw them, Katya and Sasha, sitting together at a small table in the corner, their hands intertwined, their eyes locked. The world around them didn't exist. A coldness settled in my chest, spreading like ice through my veins. My feet felt rooted to the ground, unwilling to carry me forward, unwilling to pull me back. I stood there, frozen, as the truth unraveled before me, clear as daylight, undeniable as the air in my lungs. Katya looked up first. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But she didn't move, didn't pull away, didn't rush to explain. And then Sasha turned, and I saw it in his face. He wasn't surprised to see me. He wasn't even ashamed. He just sighed and said, "I'm sorry. It just happened." That was it. 2 years of love, laughter, and whispered promises, erased in an instant. No grand declarations, no desperate attempts to fix it. Just 4 words that carried the weight of betrayal. Final and absolute. I walked out of that cafe without a word, without a scene. My hands trembled. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. But I kept walking. The cold air outside burned my skin, but I welcomed the pain. It was better than the hollow void inside me, the slow, creeping realization that I had lost them both in a single moment. Katya didn't call. She didn't try to explain. She didn't even pretend to be sorry. And Sasha? He disappeared from my life as easily as he had slipped into hers. I told myself I wouldn't break. I buried myself in work, in distractions, in anything that could dull the sharp edges of my grief. But every night, when the world was quiet and I was left alone with my thoughts, that moment replayed in my mind. Katya's hand in his, Sasha's indifferent gaze, the sickening finality of it all. And then, a month later, the phone rang. "Marina, I need help." The voice on the other end was barely recognizable. Gone was Katya's usual confidence, her easy charm. What was left was something raw, something broken. What happened? I asked, my fingers tightening around the receiver, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was a pause, a sharp inhale, and then the words that should have felt like justice, but only felt like an echo of my own pain. Sasha. He left. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly, not because I was surprised, but because I had known from the moment she took him that this day would come. Can we talk? Please. And against every instinct, against the part of me that screamed to let her drown in her own betrayal, I said, where? I met her at a small cafe, different from the one where my world had shattered. This one was dimly lit, quieter, the kind of place where whispered secrets disappeared into the air, never to be heard again. Katya sat in the farthest corner, her posture slumped, her hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. For a long moment, I just looked at her. The woman in front of me wasn't the Katya I had known. Her usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, her makeup smudged as if she had been crying, and her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the cup to her lips. I took a seat across from her, setting my bag down deliberately. She looked up, her eyes glassy, her lips parting as if she was about to speak. But she hesitated. I waited. If she wanted something from me, she would have to be the first to break the silence. Finally, she exhaled shakily. Sasha left. I didn't react. She wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know, but I wanted to hear her say it. He just woke up one morning, looked at me like I was a stranger, and said he needed space, that he wasn't sure about us anymore, that maybe we had moved too fast. She let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. And then he left, just like that, took his things and walked out the door. Still, I said nothing, Dot. She swallowed hard, her fingers clenching around her cup. I thought you'd say something. What do you want me to say? My voice was steady, calm. That I'm sorry? That I know how you feel? I leaned forward slightly, my gaze locking onto hers. I do know how you feel, Katya. I know exactly how it feels to be tossed aside like an afterthought. You, of all people, should know that. She flinched, her expression crumbling for just a second before she caught herself. I made a mistake, she whispered. I know that now. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. A mistake is spilling coffee on someone. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. What you did wasn't a mistake, Katya. It was a choice. You saw what you wanted and you took it. And now, what? You expect me to feel bad for you? Her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment, something in me twisted. But then I remembered the way she had looked at me that day in the cafe, how she had chosen silence over an apology, how she had walked away with Sasha without a second glance. She wiped at her eyes quickly, looking away. I don't know who else to turn to. A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. That's funny, because when I lost everything, I didn't have you either. She looked back at me then, and for the first time, I saw something real in her expression. Regret, maybe, or realization. But it didn't change the past. I stood up, pushing my chair back. Here's the thing, Katya. You wanted him and you got him. But you never stopped to think about what would happen when the excitement wore off. You built your happiness on someone else's pain. And now you know how fragile it really was. I grabbed my bag, slinging it over my shoulder. I won't tell you I'm sorry, and I won't tell you it's okay. But here's my advice. Next time, don't take what isn't yours unless you're sure you can keep it. She stared at me, her lips slightly parted, as if she wanted to say something else. But I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked out of the cafe, feeling lighter with every step. Dot. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one left behind. Dot. As I stepped out of the cafe, the cold air bit at my skin, but I welcomed it. It felt clean, sharp, like it was cutting away the last remnants of whatever Katya and I had been. I walked without a destination, letting the city swallow me whole. St. Petersburg had a way of mirroring emotions. Its winding streets could feel like a warm embrace or an endless maze of loneliness, depending on the weight you carried. Tonight, though, I wasn't burdened. Not anymore. Katya's downfall had been inevitable. Sasha had never been the prize she thought he was. He was a man drawn to the chase, to the thrill of something new. The moment the excitement faded, he did what he always did. Left. She had taken him from me thinking she'd won, but all she'd inherited was an expiration date. And now, she was just another name on the list of women Sasha had used and discarded. A part of me wondered if he'd try to come back. If he'd call me one night, voice dripping with nostalgia, trying to rewrite history. But I already knew my answer. The weeks passed, and I focused on myself. The pain no longer consumed me. It became a quiet hum, something I could acknowledge and then set aside. I worked late, took myself out to restaurants, read books I had put off for too long. And slowly, I started to feel like me again, like Marina, not the woman Sasha and Katya had broken. Then, one evening, as I was walking home from work, my phone buzzed. A message. Sasha, can we talk? I stopped in my tracks, staring at the screen. I had expected this, but seeing it in black and white still sent a ripple through me. I took a breath, then typed back, no. Dot. It was the shortest, simplest word, but it carried all the weight of my healing, my growth, my decision to never let him or Katya define me again. There was no reply, no desperate follow-up, just silence. And that silence was the sweetest revenge of all. Days turned into weeks, and with every passing moment, the ghosts of Sasha and Katya faded further into the background of my life. I no longer flinched when I passed the cafe where I had once seen them together. Their names became just words, stripped of the power to wound me. Then, one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, a notification popped up. A message request from Katya. I almost ignored it. Almost, but curiosity got the better of me. Katya, I need to talk to you. It's important. I stared at the message, debating whether to open Pandora's box again. After all, what could she possibly say that would matter now? But something in me, maybe the last remnant of our old friendship, nudged me to reply. Me. What do you want, Katya? The reply came almost instantly. Katya. It's about Sasha. I felt nothing at the mention of his name. Not anger, not pain, just a vague, detached curiosity. Me. That's your problem, not mine. Katya. No, Marina. You don't understand. He's not who we thought he was. A strange chill passed through me. Me. What are you talking about? There was a long pause before her next message came through. Katya. Can we meet? Please. Against my better judgment. I agreed. Not because I cared about Sasha, but because something about her message unsettled me. We met at a bar this time, one far from our usual spots. Katya looked even worse than before. Pale, jittery, as if she hadn't slept in days. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her fingers gripping her drink like it was an anchor. What's going on? I asked, cutting straight to the point. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Sasha. He's not just some guy who jumps from woman to woman. There's more to him, things I didn't see before. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. You dragged me here to tell me that he's a serial cheater? I already knew that, Katya. She shook her head. No, Marina, it's worse. After he left me, I did some digging. He has a pattern. He finds women like us, ones who trust too easily. Ones who don't see the danger until it's too late. Something in her expression made my stomach tighten. Danger? She swallowed hard. I think, I think he scams them. I frowned. What? I found out he's been in and out of different cities, different relationships, and every time he leaves just before things fall apart, women who suddenly find their bank accounts emptied, credit cards maxed out, debts they never remember taking on. Her voice was shaky. I checked my finances, Marina. Money is missing. A lot of it. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sasha had never asked me for money, never done anything obvious. But had I been blind to something deeper? Katya reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of printed emails, financial statements. She pushed them toward me. I don't think he just left, Marina. I think he's running. A cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was something far, far worse. I stared at the papers in front of me, my pulse pounding in my ears. The pages were a blur at first. Transactions, withdrawals, account changes. But as I focused, the details became chillingly clear. Large sums of money disappearing from Katya's account. Credit cards she swore she never applied for. Loans taken out in her name. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. How did you not notice this sooner? My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. Katya flinched. I don't know, she admitted, her voice small. At first it was little things. Money moving between accounts, charges that I assumed were just mistakes. And then after he left, I started looking deeper. Marina? He drained me. He left me with nothing. I should have felt satisfaction. Should have thought, good, now you know how it feels. But instead, a deep unease settled over me. Because if he had done this to her, what had he done to me? I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling slightly as I opened my banking app. At first glance, nothing seemed off. But then I checked my savings. My stomach lurched. There was less money than I remembered. A lot less. Katya must have seen the look on my face because she reached across the table. Check everything, she urged. Go through your statements. Look for anything unusual. I did, and the more I looked, the sicker I felt. Small amounts at first, over the course of months. Withdrawals I didn't remember making. A credit card I was sure I had never applied for. With transactions in places I'd never been. It was so subtle, so carefully hidden, that if I hadn't been looking for it, I never would have noticed. I felt cold, like ice had settled deep in my bones. That bastard, I whispered. Katya gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, and he's probably doing it to someone else right now. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see the woman who had betrayed me. I saw someone just as broken, just as used, and beneath the hurt and resentment, something new took its place. Rage. Not just at Sasha, but at myself, for trusting him, for letting my heartbreak blind me to the real danger. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. We can't let him get away with this. Katya nodded, her eyes dark with determination. I was hoping you'd say that. And just like that, the game had changed. Sasha thought he had won, that he had taken everything from us and disappeared without consequences. But he was wrong. He had spent years preying on women like us, thinking he would never face the fallout. It was time to make him pay. The next morning, I woke up with a singular focus, tracking Sasha down. Katya and I met at a small co-working cafe, where we spread out our laptops, phones, and all the documents she had dug up. We were two women scorned, but more than that, we were two women who had been used. That was something I couldn't let go of. Katya tapped away at her laptop. I've been trying to find out where he went. His social media's wiped. No posts, no stories, nothing. It's like he vanished. That didn't surprise me. Sasha was careful. He never left a digital trail if he could help it. But I knew him well enough to know he had one fatal flaw. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was. I thought back to our time together. Sasha was a man of habit, predictable in ways he never realized. I turned my phone over in my hand. He always used the same password patterns, birthdays, pet names, stupid things he thought no one would guess. Katya raised an eyebrow. You think we can get into something? If we're lucky. I opened an old email account I remembered him using, one he had logged into on my laptop once. I tried the first combination that came to mind. His mother's birth year, his childhood dog's name, incorrect password. I tried again. This time, his ex-girlfriend's initials and the year he graduated college. Nothing. Katya sighed. He wouldn't be that dumb, would he? I tapped my fingers against the table, thinking. Sasha was arrogant. He believed himself untouchable, and that meant he would be careless somewhere. Then it hit me. I typed in one last attempt. Katya's name, followed by the month they got together. The screen flickered. Then, we were in. Katya let out a sharp breath. Jesus, he really used my name? I didn't waste time gloating over how predictable he was. I immediately started sifting through his inbox. There were the usual things, newsletters, automated subscriptions. But then I found what I was looking for. A flight confirmation. My pulse jumped. He booked a one-way ticket. Katya leaned over. Where to? I stared at the screen. Moscow. Katya swore under her breath. He's skipping town, probably already setting up his next con. I clenched my jaw. Not this time. I scrolled further and something caught my eye. An email exchange with a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Ready for the next one?" I clicked it open, my stomach twisting. The message was brief, cryptic. Sasha, got what I needed, on to the next. Send me details. The reply was just as short. Unknown contact. Funds are moving. Lay low for a while. We'll send new profiles soon. I stared at the words, my blood running cold. He's not just some scammer working alone. Katya paled. He's part of something bigger. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about stopping him before he did it again. I exhaled slowly. We need to go to the police. Katya hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, but first, let's make sure we have everything on him. We spent the next 3 hours pulling every trace of information we could find. Financial records, aliases, old addresses. And with every piece, the picture became clearer. Sasha wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator. And we were about to become his worst nightmare. By the time we walked into the police station, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer force of my determination. Katya and I had gathered everything. Bank statements, proof of fraudulent transactions, evidence of Sasha's pattern of deception. We had printed out emails, highlighted connections, even found traces of social media accounts he thought he had erased. Now, we just had to make them listen. The officer at the front desk barely glanced up. What's the issue? I took a deep breath. We have information on a financial scam, identity theft, fraud. The person responsible is planning to leave the country soon. That got his attention. He looked up, assessing us both before nodding toward a side room. Wait here. Minutes stretched into an hour. A detective finally arrived. A man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a skeptical expression. All right, he said, folding his arms. Tell me everything. And we did. I started from the beginning. My relationship with Sasha, how he had drained my accounts without me realizing. Katya followed, detailing how he had done the same to her. Then we showed him the emails, the fake accounts, the financial trail that suggested Sasha wasn't working alone. To my relief, the detective listened. He asked questions, took notes, but as the minutes passed, I saw the same doubt I had feared creeping onto his face. You say this man has taken money from both of you, but have you directly reported the fraud to your banks? Katya scoffed. Of course we did. They're investigating, but you know how slow that process is. Meanwhile, Sasha is about to disappear. The detective sighed. Look, I believe you've both been wronged. But this? What you're describing? It's bigger than just one guy. If he's working with others, it means he's careful, smart. Do you really think we can stop him before he vanishes? Something snapped in me. I leaned forward, my voice steady. If you don't do something now, he's going to find another woman. He's going to drain her accounts. He's going to move on just like he always does. And one day, someone won't just lose their savings. They'll lose everything. The detective studied me, then Katya. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. I'll escalate this. No promises, but we'll look into him. It wasn't the guarantee I wanted, but it was something. We left the station in silence, stepping into the cold St. Petersburg air. Katya crossed her arms. Do you think they'll actually do anything? I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know. But I did know one thing. I wasn't done. They might, I said. But even if they don't, I have another idea. Katya looked at me warily. Marina. I'm not going to sit around and hope for justice, I said firmly. Sasha made one mistake. He thought we'd stay silent. He thought we were weak. Katya's lips parted, realization dawning. You want to expose him? A slow, grim smile spread across my face. Not just expose him, I want to ruin him. And just like that, the real plan began. The next few days were a blur of planning, digging, and strategizing. If the police weren't going to act fast enough, I would take matters into my own hands. Sasha had spent years carefully constructing his persona, a charming, successful man who always seemed just out of reach, always moving on before the truth caught up to him. It was time to rip that mask off. The first thing I did was compile every single piece of evidence we had into a detailed post. I wasn't just writing about my own experience. I laid out his entire pattern, from past victims to his current scam. I uploaded screenshots of his emails, flight confirmations, and fake business profiles. Then, with Katya's help, I found online forums and social media groups dedicated to financial fraud, scam awareness, and even victims of romantic deception. We blasted the post everywhere. Within hours, comments started pouring in. Women from different cities, some from as far as Kiev and Warsaw, began sharing their own stories. A woman named Irina claimed he had stolen from her a year ago. Another, Alina, said he had drained her mother's savings by pretending to be a business investor. It was worse than I thought. Sasha wasn't just a serial cheater or a con artist. He was a predator. The post started gaining traction, being shared across Telegram groups, financial fraud pages, and even dating forums. By the end of the day, his name was trending in small online circles. And then, something unexpected happened. Someone sent me a message from an anonymous account. I know where he is. My heart pounded as I clicked on the message. He's in Moscow, but he's not alone. The sender attached a blurry photo. Sasha, sitting in a cafe. Across from him, another woman. Young, elegant, completely unaware of what she was getting into. A fresh victim. Katya and I didn't waste time. We booked the next train to Moscow. Neither of us spoke much during the journey, but the energy between us was electric. Anger, anticipation, and something else, a hunger for justice. We arrived in Moscow in the late evening, exhausted but wired. The anonymous source had sent another update. Sasha and his new target were staying at an upscale hotel in the city center. He was moving fast, probably sensing the heat from our online exposure. I checked my phone. Our post was still spreading. We only had one shot at this. That night, as we stood outside the hotel, watching from a distance, Katya turned to me. Are we really doing this? I exhaled. Yes, because if we don't, he's going to do it again. Then, With my heart hammering in my chest, I stepped forward. It was time for Sasha to face the consequences. We waited all night. I didn't close my eyes, watching the hotel windows, waiting for the moment to strike the final blow. Sasha was used to being the hunter, but now he was the prey, and it scared me to realize just how satisfying that felt. Early in the morning, he stepped out of the hotel with his latest victim, a young woman with a naive smile, unaware of what was coming. We intercepted them at the entrance. I took a step forward. Sasha. He froze. His eyes widened, but instead of fear, I saw calculation, his mind racing to find a way out. Marina, what are you doing here? He forced a smile, but the corners of his mouth trembled. I didn't answer. I just pulled out my phone and pressed play. That's him! Katya's voice came from behind me. The con artist. People around us slowed their steps, listening. Some pulled out their phones. Others whispered to each other. What is she talking about? The woman beside him asked, her voice wary. I can explain, he muttered, but I had already handed her my phone, displaying the posts and comments. She took it, her eyes scanning the screen, and her face turned as pale as snow. You? Her voice trembled. Is this true? Sasha said nothing. And then I saw it. The moment he realized it was over. A crowd was forming outside the hotel. Some were recording, others were already calling the police. Seeing no way out, Sasha made one last desperate move. Marina, he stepped toward me, his eyes shining. You're not like this. You're not the kind of person who destroys lives. We loved each other. I laughed, loudly, right in his face. You destroyed your own life. And at that moment, heavy footsteps sounded behind us. The police. Katya stepped forward and calmly said, He's a fraud. We have proof. Sasha tried to bolt, but two uniformed officers already had him by the arms. The crowd erupted. Some shouted, some clapped. As they dragged him toward the car, he turned to me one last time. You'll pay for this, he hissed. I smiled. I already have, for years. Now it's your turn. Sasha ended up at the police station. Our evidence, along with testimonies from other victims, sealed his fate. A few weeks later, he was officially arrested. Charges of fraud, financial scams, theft. Turns out he'd been wanted for a long time, but he was too good at slipping away. This time, there was no escape. He tried to twist the truth, to blame us. But the judges weren't fools. He was sentenced 5 years. Katya and I attended the trial. The moment the judge announced the verdict, I felt an odd sense of relief. Not triumph, not victory, just closure. Katya squeezed my hand. We did it, she whispered. I nodded. We were no longer victims. Sasha vanished from our lives as if he had never existed. Katya decided to move to another city, to start fresh. I stayed, but I was no longer the trusting girl I once was. I threw myself into work, finally bought my own apartment, and recovered every penny he had stolen from me. Sometimes, I heard that Sasha had filed appeals, but no one listened. All his connections, all his tricks, none of them worked anymore. He was broken. One day, I received a message from an unknown number. Are you happy? I knew it was him. I didn't reply. I just deleted the message and went to get a coffee, because finally, at last, my life belonged to me.